A reading from the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What was come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh, and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." One of our best contemporary American writers, Cormac McCarthy, wrote a book a few years ago called The Road. The Road is a post-apocalyptic story of a father and his young son who are making their way across a burned-out and radiation-singed America. The sun is obscured, and a low-hanging fog mixed with smoke constantly hangs in the air. Forests have burned. Crops can't grow. Only a few desperate people wander through the countryside. The nature of the catastrophe that the world endured isn't made explicit. It just began with a long sheer of light and then a series of low concussions. As they walk in the direction of the Gulf Coast, pushing a shopping cart containing bits of scavenged food and fuel, the father and his son encounter devastation and human cruelty on an unimaginable scale: slavery, torture, cannibalism. They survive because of their wits, their perseverance, maybe their luck. Memories of a world the child can't recall are kept alive by the father, who retains a vision of mountain trout that smelled of moss in your hand. And periodically, a simple conversation ensues between the father and the son, in which the son asks, "And we're carrying the fire?" And his father replies, "And we're carrying the fire, yes." The son is making certain that they still have the ability to build a fire to keep away the chill at night and to heat the scraps of food they find. But more than that, he is seeking assurance that they have a light against the darkness, that in a world where nothing seems good, they possess a light that shows them the way. The child wants to know that their light shines in the darkness, and that the darkness shall not overcome it. One of our modern day saints is a 79-year-old Canadian named Jean Vanier. Mr. Vanier is the founder of an organization called L'Arche, meaning the Ark. L'Arche began 50 years ago in an effort to care for the mentally disabled. In a L'Arche community, there is very little separation between the caregiver and the care receiver. They all live together, share meals, share their lives. The organization is now composed of 131 communities in 34 countries. As a social innovator and philosopher, Mr. Vanier explores the seeming contradictions of Christian thought, how power is found in humility, strength in weakness, and how to find light in the darkest of human conditions. In an interview a couple of years ago, Mr. Vanier said, "You see, the big thing for me is to love reality and not live in the imagination, not live in what could have been or what should have been or what can be, and somewhere to find reality and then discover that God is present." The work of Laosh is not to regard suffering in the world as something to be fixed from a distance, but something to be embraced, to be lived, to be brought up close where it can be shared, brought close up, so that what the world thinks of as ugly can be revealed in its beauty. The work of Laroche shows us that the light illuminates the present and reveals to us that God is in it. As we read in John, the Word, or Logos in Greek, is the essence of what God was, is, and forever will be. And this ever-present Logos is revealed by the light of love, a light that illuminates the unsightly and finds it beautiful. We heard the Apostle Paul tell us today that God became human in order to fully know and to love us as humans. God's entry into the human condition through Christ is the ultimate in this kind of relational ministry. It is the Word made flesh. Benedictine monk, Brother John Mang, devoted his life to the study and practice of prayer. His method of centering prayer is designed to enable the prayer to attain a level of awareness, a focus on the immediacy of the present that brings to life the sense of incarnation. The depth of the prayer that John Mange prays allows the prayer to more fully understand what is meant by God made flesh, experiencing the incarnation from the center of our being. The gospel reading we read today, known as John's prologue, is one of the most beautifully poetic parts of the Bible. It's filled with the majestic language of light, glory, grace, and truth. But these remain abstract concepts if we don't grasp the essence of John's proclamation. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. If you've heard me preach and teach over the past few years, you know that I talk a lot about what unites the world's great religions. I tend to emphasize the commonalities more than the differences. However, John points in the direction of a critical difference found in Christianity. As Christians, we envision a God who does not remain remote, simply resident in the heavens, apart from joy and suffering. When we speak of the Word made flesh, we speak of a God who lives in our midst. It's one thing to speak of a distant God of compassion, truth, love, justice, and generosity. But when we worship God who became flesh and bones in the form of Jesus, the Son, if we worship a God who became flesh and bones in the form of Jesus the Son, it calls on us to put some skin, literally, put some skin in the game. Thinking of God in this way enables us to bring life to abstract concepts like compassion, patience, hospitality, and justice. When we choose to act on these ideas, we bring them into a world of light and life, and the Word is made flesh. As a progressive evangelical, Michaela Ruzizi commented, "It's often said that during Christmas, Christians should seek ways to newly birth Christ in the world. But what is first required is for Christians to simply incarnate themselves, to be utterly present in the world. Only then we're able to remain awake to the real sufferings and joys of the world. Only then can we hear God's call and act upon it." This kind of change is what happens when we don't separate ourselves from the suffering in the world. We fear that kind of exposure to suffering because it seems dangerous, unknown, revolting, or troublesome. Our fear is fully justified, but not for the reasons we think. because learning to be present to the unlovable, to the ugly, to the other, will almost certainly change us for the better. The light of Christ illuminates the darkness, revealing who we are, how we are to love. The true light, as John says, enlightens everyone, and we are carrying the fire. Amen.